and welcome to Budget Evening. This is Super Primetime telecast on Budget Evening right here on ET Now. It's a fine balancing act by Finance Minister Arun Jaitley as he's given a big push to rural economy and public infrastructure, even as he's stuck to the path on fiscal prudence. Budget 2017 has proposed a 24% hike in capital expenditure to over 3 lakh crore rupees, although there are no big takeaways on fiscal giveaways, in fact, in fiscal deficit, which has now been reset at 3.2%. The corpus for Manrega has been hiked to 48,000 crore rupees, the highest ever allocation for the government's flagship job guarantee scheme.
There is, however, some relief for small companies as the tax on them has been cut to 25% in a bid to keep the middle class along. The finance minister also did slash the tax rate for individuals who earn between 2.5 to 5 lakh rupees annually to 5% from the current 10. And it was party time as far as Dalal Street is concerned. Jaitley kept the threshold for long-term capital gains unchanged. No surprises that the Sensex jumped close to 500 points in trade today, the biggest gain that the markets have seen on a budget day in the recent past. Jaitley's please all budget is a top story right here on The Verdict.
Let's take it across to a power-pack lineup that we've got joining us live and exclusive on India Tonight. We're putting the spotlight on the pod of the budget. Jayant Sinha, Minister of State for Aviation, joins in live and exclusive on ET Now this evening. Anand Sharma, senior leader of the Congress Party. Jay Panda of the Biju Janata Dal. Mukesh Butani joins us live in the studio. And of course, Swaminathan Iyer. I want to tell our panel there's a reason why we've kept India Inc. out of this debate this evening, because I can tell you, I'm not a CEO, and I can tell you what they will say. It's a 10 on 10 budget, it's pro-growth, it's pro-reform, it's pro-poor, it's pro-market. So we thought, let's get people who are going to ask tough questions. I'm sure Jayant Sinha is going to love that as well. And who better than Swaminathan Iyer to kick things off with? It's the verdict that everyone wants to hear. Swaminathan Iyer, what's your verdict on Budget 2017? You know, Shaktikanta Das, the Economic Affairs Secretary, was disappointed in the afternoon when you rated the budget at 5.5, even though the markets were rallying, 400 odd points. What's your verdict at 9 p.m.?
Well, I think the markets have rallied more because they are relieved at inaction in the budget than of the action in the budget. They had feared all kinds of things on capital gains. They had feared there was going to be an increase in service tax to 18%. They were worried about the tax on indirect capital gains of FIIs. None of that happened. They were worried about the fiscal net borrowing of the government. So what the government did not do, there was a huge relief rally. I myself, why am I disappointed? I am also disappointed because of things the government did not do. This is the fourth budget, the last chance for structural change. Did you get privatization and what was called strategic asset sales? You did not get it. Earlier on, Mr. Jaitley had said, I'm going to corporatize the railways, I'm going to corporatize the ports. Has that happened? No, it didn't happen. I'm astonished actually that they did not take advantage of demonetization. I mean, this, according to the economic survey, is yielding a particular fiscal windfall. It would have made logic to say whatever this windfall is, which Arvind Subramaniam has not quantified, but make an estimate. If you had put even 1,000 rupees into each Jandhan account, I mean, it would have been created a link between the attack on black money and direct benefit to the masses. Here was a golden opportunity and it was missed. I would also say that cutting corporate tax from 30 to 25 for all the large companies that are relevant, if you ask me, it's hardly been cut at all. And you know, you're missing almost your last chance to do it. Finally, I would say bank recapitalization, 10,000 crores I don't think really is remotely enough. As far as the cleansing of politics is concerned, well, you know, we need to cleanse it. But if you say instead of 20,000 rupees, we will have donations of maximum of 2,000, we'll get the same kind of money laundering that we saw in the case of high value notes. I mean, if there are X people contributing 20,000, you'll have 10X people contributing 2,000.
Right.
I mean, this kind of thing is easily sidestepped. Something much tougher should have been done. So, I mean, there are positives in the budget, which you have already mentioned, and therefore I won't repeat. There's an increase in the capex.
Swami,
but the final point I'll make is the fiscal deficit. Okay.
Swami, I'm just going to come to you because you've raised some red flags there. I know there is some green that you like in the budget, but Jayant Sinha, I want you to take this head on because this is not just the view of Swaminathan Iyer, whose verdict really on the budget matters. This is the view that's really coming in from a cross-section of people we've been speaking to. Demonetization, and as a result, the budget mathematics, the numbers don't seem to add up. What have you budgeted with? You budgeting with half a year's deficit targets, you're budgeting with half a year's growth targets, you're budgeting with half a year's revised estimates for revenue correction. So numbers don't add up due to demonetization, and yet there are no final figures on demonetization at all. The budget was presented in the overhang of demonetization. We still do not know how much has come back, what is going to be extinguished, what happens next.
No, the budget numbers have been put together in a very prudent manner, Supriya, and as you know, when Mr. Das spoke to you all this afternoon, he said that the numbers are realistic and achievable, and of course they are. We've shown over the last few years that as a government we are very, very thoughtful about the numbers that we put out, and unlike in the UPA where there was a big gap between the budget numbers and the actual revised numbers, our numbers have been spot on, which is why we have demonstrated over and over again the kind of control and fiscal management that we have in place. I think that's why you should trust us that we will be able to land the numbers, and I think what we have done is to keep things fairly conservative, and as and when we get additional resources through demonetization, recognize that we do have some risks that we have to deal with, for example on the indirect side with GST, etc. So I think in the end they'll balance each other out, and I think therefore this is a very conservative and prudent set of numbers. As far as Swami is concerned, you know, with all due respect to him, I'd ask him to take a step back and really try and understand what it is that as a government we've been able to achieve in the last 3 years in terms of absolutely massive and dramatic structural change to the Indian economy. In fact, we are completely rebuilding the Indian economy. We've taken a number of measures to open up the economy. FIPB, for example, in this budget has been abolished. FDI has been opened up in a massive way. We have enabled people, for example, in the aviation sector to come in a way that's unprecedented. So we massively opened up the economy, number one. Number two, we have gone through and established through GST and all of the fiscal steps that we have taken a completely new fiscal architecture. We've ramped up infrastructure. We've identified important beneficiary groups like farmers, like the poor. We've put in place a social security system. We've reduced leakages through all the things that we're doing in direct benefit transfer. So if you look across the board, the scale and scope of what we've already achieved in 3 years is staggering. So yes, you can cavil, you can come up with one or two more things we could have done here and there, and of course reform is absolutely a continuous process, it will go on. But I will say that, you know, we have massively transformed the economy. When you take up the point that Swami is bringing up around strategic disinvestment, the Honorable Finance Minister is very clear when he said that we announced in the last budget that we will be moving forward as far as strategic disinvestment is concerned. We will stick to that policy, and in fact, you know that Niti Aayog has already laid out several different
I'm going to interrupt you there.
As far as
I'm sorry, I'll seek your
indulgence.
I'll seek your indulgence and interrupt you there simply because we were talking about the budget mathematics. The numbers that the budget has worked with are from the economic survey. They're not from the CSO, because the CSO has given advanced estimates and not revised estimates. I'm going to take this across to your senior colleague from the opposition, Mr. Anand Sharma, because he was a tad disappointed when I spoke to him earlier today on no clarity from demonetization. Mr. Sharma, do you still maintain the fact that you were disappointed with no clarity on demonetization collections? Also, which part of the budget math doesn't impress you?
See, by doing away with the distinction of plan and non-plan, you are masking what is the revenue expenditure, what is the capital expenditure. Correct? That is where the big flaw is, because the revenue expenditure of this government is huge and the capital expenditure would be on government borrowings.
Board Jay Panda as well. Jay Panda, let's not forget the context of this budget. This budget has been presented just a few months after a bold and controversial move to demonetize 86% of currency in circulation. The expectation, at least in sections of the industry, is that this will be a stimulus budget. We'll talk about the downside to that as well. Demand revival was the dire need of the economy. Do you think enough has been done as far as demand revival is concerned in this budget? Jay Panda.
Well, let's look at the effects of demonetization and what the budget could have done. If you remember, last year, when 25,000 crores was allocated in the budget for bank recapitalization, it was considered a good step but far from adequate. Now this year only 10,000 crores has been allocated, but no one is making an issue of it simply because the banks are flush with the deposits that have come in because of demonetization. And I think the FM referred to the initial effects of interest rates going down and so on and so forth. Now regarding demand revival, I would imagine that if you rationalize the taxes for the lower end of the salaried bracket, which has happened, and also for MSMEs, that should be considered as a boost for demand revival.
Okay, I want to put the spotlight on the fisc. That's a debate that's always fascinating. You always debate about it before the budget. You always debate about it after the budget as well. Mukesh Butani, your call on the government's move to not stick with the fiscal deficit target of for FY18 and give itself a little bit of leeway.
Well, I think it was on anticipated line, because if he has to create employment, which he can do primarily through public investment, then he has to enhance the public investment, and that's where he's going to get the elbow room. I have one question to Mr. Sinha on the political contribution. This is something that Swami also alluded on to, that it's very easy to circumvent the law by having political contributors less than 2,000 rupees. My suggestion is that the government would have done well if you had put a cap on total contributions in the less than 2,000 category.
Mr. Butani, I'm going to come to that, and I will seek your indulgence here, because that's a debate that we want to have with all these politicians in just a while. But to take your point on fiscal deficit, you were saying it was along expected lines, and which is why perhaps markets did not react negatively. Jayant Sinha, I want to pose this question to you, Sandeep, and we've been internally talking about fiscal deficit. You want to take it off with Mr. Jayant Sinha's
Yeah, sure. Jayant Sinha, I know you're a fiscal conservative, aren't you? You've always wanted the government to stick to the roadmap on fiscal deficit. You're smiling there. Are you disappointed? What was the compulsion for the government? Could it not have managed the fiscal deficit in such a way that it doesn't breach the red line? Have we hurt our credibility with international rating agencies? Jayant Sinha.
Not at all, not at all, and I think the Honourable Finance Minister made the exact right decision to bring it down to 3.2% and not go all the way to 3%. Because we've had a situation where we've had a monetary compression because of obviously demonetization, and that has already been deflationary, and then to bring down spending this much by 0.5% of GDP with respect to the fiscal deficit would have been a little too much compression as far as the economy is concerned. However, you have to peel the onion here in terms of really understanding the quality of the fiscal management. So we can't just stick with the headline number of 3.2%. The very important aspect here that we need to pay attention to is actually government borrowing, because really it is the sustainability of government debt that is the true constraint for us as far as our fiscal situation is concerned. And if you actually look at government borrowing, the projections in the budget take us down from 3.65 lakh crores, which is what they will be this year, to 3.5 lakh crores. And that means government borrowing is coming down, and therefore government debt as a percent of GDP also is going to be very benign. And I think we'll see the impact of this on government yields, because I think government yields will come down tomorrow and in the near future as well, because they'll see that the government is putting less pressure on borrowings overall. And I think that's one of the very important but not very often discussed achievements of our government, is that if you actually look at the rate at which government is borrowing, which by the way makes a huge difference to our overall fiscal position, because the amount of money that we have to set aside for servicing government debt comes down. Those government yields are actually coming down dramatically and will continue to come down dramatically as we demonstrate this very solid fiscal management. So you really have to look at our fiscal management in the full context to really understand what we are doing as far as sustainable fiscal consolidation is concerned.
A view from the Congress party, because the Congress always believed that you should have stuck with fiscal consolidation. I think Chidambaram wrote about it. It was there in the real assessment of the economy, so to say. Mr. Sharma, why is missing fiscal deficit target so unpardonable for the Congress? It's a valid suggestion that Jayant Sinha is making, that the quality of fiscal deficit should also matter. Why are you ignoring capital expenditure that has gone up by 25%, infra spending close to what, 4 lakh crore rupees now?
How are you? You are again missing the, wood for the trees. I have said that by doing away with this distinction of plan and non-plan, they are masking the real numbers. Number one. Number two, where is the money which the government has got? Government has snatched people's money. No other government in the world had done that. 67% of rural India is unbanked. You have a nation of 650,000 villages with 1,32,000 bank branches and 212,000 ATMs, all in urban areas, and of the bank branches, 73% are again in urban areas. And the Grameen Bank and the cooperative banks were neither allowed to exchange old notes nor given new money. Let's look at these facts. So where is the money being given to the agriculture? For seed diversification, for new seed development, for irrigation. Please, we will look at all the numbers, because these budget documents are masking much, and then only the truth will come out.
Okay, Swami, I'm going to come to you. You heard Jayant Sinha talk about the quality of fiscal deficit. I know you're a fiscal conservative as well. Every time you don't like governments breaching these targets that are set out. Are you convinced with the explanation given by Jayant Sinha on why it had to be done in this budget, that the quality of fiscal deficit isn't that bad after all?
No, I will entirely agree with Jayant that on the one hand, the government has, in the last 3-4 years, taken a number of steps to open up the economy, to liberalize the economy. Yes, in small stages, there has definitely been progress. He is definitely correct in saying that, by bringing down the yields, there is definite improvement in the quality of fiscal deficit. I will agree. But having said that, let me say that Mr. Jaitley himself in his first budget said, I'm going to bring down the fiscal deficit to 3% within 2 years. Then he put it off a second time. You have put this off twice within 4 years as to when you're going to reach the 3%. And if you go back to the FRBM, you will find that actually you were supposed to reach the 3% of GDP fiscal deficit back in 2008. And you're going to get to it 10 years later. So, there's a background. It's not just a question of what happened yesterday or the effect of demonetization. There is, Arvind Subramaniam, the economic survey, raised the question, why is it that we don't seem to have enough credibility with the rating agencies? I would say this is one of them. Mr. Jaitley did not have to promise in his first budget that he will bring down the deficit to 3% so quickly. He could have then itself said he will do it more gradually. But when you say I will do it, and I say you will do it, and you postpone it twice within 4 budgets, this does affect your credibility. So that was the limited point I was making. But I agree with Jayant Sinha that it is a good thing that inflation has come down, that the yields have come down, and that this therefore will make debt servicing easier.
It's tough to get Swami to agree, so Jayant, you should be a happy man there. Swami's agreeing with some part of your arguments, but I'm really going to turn the focus and put it on its head, because your government was expected to create jobs. I'm actually going to get in an opposition view and then come to you to counter that one. Mr. Sharma, the focus on job creation, 90% cut in job creation, do you think enough stress has been laid in this budget as far as fueling the jobs, fueling employment is concerned?
It's not 90%. Listen, it's not 90%. First of all, if 1.25 lakh jobs were created according to the government, more than 1 million jobs were also lost in various sectors because of the sharp fall in manufacturing, sharp fall in factory production, sharp fall in exports. Exports had fallen close to 20 months. Now, what the economic survey says, in 2 months there has been an export increase. How much? 1.6 billion. Less than 9,500 crore. How much you had lost in those 2 months in the previous years? 13 to 14 billion. So what are we saying? What are we telling our people? And why the numbers of the jobs and wages and incomes lost post demonetization? You go across the country, informal sector has been worst hit. Factory productions are down somewhere by 70%, somewhere by 90%. And the average would be somewhere between 60 and 67%. This is a fact. Go by the CMIE reports, go by the other organizations' reports. Now, how will you compensate them? So these are about, anybody's guess. I'm getting the numbers done. I've asked my office to put together the numbers. Anywhere between 48 million to 60 million jobs are gone. And what is the incentivization for job creation, you tell me? And we are talking of agriculture. What has been given to agriculture? If you are
Anand
adding
Sharma,
Manrega is a legal commitment of the Indian state. It's the legal right of the Indian citizen.
I'm sure Jayant Sinha is itching to counter you, but before I go to Jayant, let me get in a word from Jay Panda as well. Job creation has been the plank on which this government was elected. The pace of job creation has declined. You cannot deny it, partly because private sector is not quite in investment mode. Do you think enough is there in the budget as far as job creation is concerned? After hearing from you, we'll throw it to Jayant Sinha to counter both of you.
I think this is one aspect that is going to get debated quite a lot across the political spectrum. And I feel the following. First of all, we must see the context of job creation. And it is a global phenomenon because of automation and because of technologies that for the same rate of growth, lesser jobs are being created compared to earlier years. So for example, today if we have 7.1% growth, it will create less jobs than if we had 7.1% growth 20 years ago. And that is a window of opportunity that we missed, that countries like China took advantage of. But having said that, I think certainly there are some indicators. For example, FIPB to be abolished, I think is a fantastic step, because if already 90% of FDI is coming in through the automatic route, and if norms can be streamlined so that all of it can come in through the automatic route, that itself is, I think, to be considered as a good boost. And I have yet to study the rationalization of capital gains taxes that have been referred to. It sounds positive in the same sort of topic that we are talking about in giving encouragement to investment, but I'll have to study that a little further.
Jayant, the field is all yours to bat there, because job creation is something that you and your government will be judged on, and you don't seem to be scoring too high there. In fact, even on Mudra, which seems to be this roaring success, the number of jobs created are far less than the targeted ones of what, 2 lakh there?
Yeah, so first let me address what Mr. Sharma was saying about the numbers. The fact is the numbers are very clear. He was suggesting that because we moved away from plan and non-plan, that as a result of that we are obscuring the data, or we are not being able to provide transparency on the data. On the other hand, I would say that by going away from plan, non-plan, we are able to very clearly explain, what is revenue expenditure and what is capital expenditure. It's right there, in fact, at the budget at a glance number, and it shows you that we are spending on the capital account 2.71 lakh crores in this budget. So the numbers are there in a very clear way. And it is the same trying to obscure the numbers and trying to present the numbers in a somewhat deceptive manner that leads to people to conclude that as far as job creation is concerned, that there is more to be done. I would in fact argue the opposite, which is that despite the global conditions that Jay just referred to, which is that large companies are not adding many jobs right now around the world. There is in fact a jobs crisis because of all of that, automation, artificial intelligence. Despite all of those conditions and sluggish global trade, we in India are still doing very well as far as job creation is concerned. And because you only look at the formal sector, you're missing most of the action as far as jobs are concerned. Really, to understand India's economy and job creation in India's economy, you have to look at the informal sector and you have to look at the entrepreneurial sector. Now, the informal sector is having gone through monetization and going now through the V-shaped recovery, has rapidly been adding jobs, and you can see that in rural areas and so on. And of course, through Mudra and through Startup India, we are adding a number of jobs as far as the entrepreneurial sector is concerned. Let me illustrate all of this with a very real life example. Let's take a village. And let me tell you the kinds of numbers you will not pick up when you look at the formal organized economy. In a village, when somebody starts to run a poultry farm or rears a few hens and goats, That is informal job creation that you will not see, but a lot of that is beginning to happen right now as agro-processing and agri-related businesses are taking off. So that's one example. Secondly, if a lady takes a mudra loan and starts a beauty parlor, again, you are not going to see that in the formal numbers, but that is happening in large numbers today because of what we are doing through mudra, and that is the entrepreneurship aspect of it. So that's not what some of these numbers are picking up, and these numbers are being used to mystify and obscure the situation. The reality is when you actually put all the pieces together, you'll see that as far as job creation is concerned, we are doing rather well, particularly when it comes to the informal sector and small and medium businesses.
I guess eventually when people go out there to vote in 2019, that's when we will really know what's the verdict as far as job creation is concerned, because, data, you can look at it either ways. You've thrown some data at us, and you're right about the fact that the informal sector is not something that you can capture easily. You can also argue that post-demonetization, maximum stress has also been felt on the informal sector. Hopefully that's transitory. But I want to shift the focus away from jobs. I don't want one topic to hijack this discussion. And the other issue where there's been some action in the budget is the crackdown on willful defaulters. The government wants to be seen as acting on that particular issue. One may argue if it's coming too late, but my expert here, Mukesh Butani, has a pointed question for you, Jayant Sinha, on the action that's been taken on willful defaulters. Mukesh?
Well, Mr. Sinha, it's a very positive move that you have taken, because currently there are restrictions as to how do you go into a trial for something that is an economic offense. So the trial, whether it's for a SEBI violation or a company law violation, has to go through the criminal procedure code. So what my reading of the finance minister's speech suggests, that you're going to bring out a law that's going to specifically look at either amending the existing law or bringing out a supplementary law such that you bring that person to subject him or her to the jurisdiction of the Indian courts. And this has been a move largely because India has not been very successful in any form of extradition in relation to the economic offences. So I was just wondering, Mr. Sinha, if you can share some more insights into what these changes are all about, because the reference is also made that this law would be within the existing framework of the Constitution.
No, of course, it has to be within the constitutional framework that we all adhere to at all times. Really, I think what we're trying to do with this law is to plug the gaps either in existing laws or through a new law that enable people to flee India. Of course, they can go to countries where extradition is very difficult, and therefore they can evade justice that way. Though, of course, we are through the criminal cases that we are filing and the extradition requests that we are filing, we're trying to bring them back to justice in India. So that is what we're trying to do as far as extradition is concerned. We're trying to plug those gaps. But I think what the Honorable Finance Minister was really emphasizing with his announcement in the budget is around confiscation of assets. So if you flee the country and there is no easy way of being able to take the assets that belong to the willful defaulter and use them in a way to be able to pay back the loans that they have taken and so on, that's really the area that we want to work on, and we want to make sure that that becomes very punitive. The confiscation of assets is also a big deterrent then for people from fleeing. So I think that's really what the Honorable Finance Minister meant there.
Right. Mr. Sinha, hold your thoughts there, because I do want to turn the focus on something else which is very important, and that's a small reprieve that has really come in as far as direct tax cuts are concerned for those in the salaried class in the bracket of 2.5 to 5 lakh. Mr. Sharma, will the Congress party support that move, at least given it's going to get in some respite for the Aam Aadmi? A small section, yes, but some respite nonetheless.
When you look at 2.5 to 5 lakh bracket. Now, there are so many tax saving schemes. People can buy bonds, securities, invest in insurance policies, invest in this PPF. So, in any case, up to 5 lakhs people were getting away, and between 5 and 10 people had these tax saving incentives. So, if you calculate, even those who had not gone in for all these schemes may get maximum benefit up to 12,000. So what is it? You factor in inflation, the cost of living, so what has been given to the citizens? After the government is flush with funds because the government has not recapitalized the banks. They have snatched people's money and recapitalized the banks. So there are answers to be given. But I think what the Honorable Finance Minister meant, that 2.5 to 5 lakh bracket, now there are so many tax saving schemes. People can buy bonds, securities, invest in insurance policies, invest in
Oh, there are many answers to be given. This is a fascinating debate so far, but tell you what, I need to take a short commercial break. When I come back, I'm going to thank you, Mr. Sharma. I know you've got other engagements. Thank you for joining us. But when we come back, we're going to have a direct face-off. Shashi Tharoor and Jayant Sinha are going to have a direct face-off right after this short break. It's something you cannot afford to miss. Shashi Tharoor joining us live on India Tonight. Both of them smile on their face. Swaminathan Iyer is going to play the referee in that face-off as well, so you can't afford to miss that. Coming up in just 2 minutes right here on ET Now.
With you on this very, very fascinating debate. What a power pack panel we have up. We're going to go across to Shashi Tharoor, who's joining us live right here on ET Now. Mr. Tharoor, it's a very direct question coming your way. Rahul Gandhi began his reaction by saying that it's a damn squib budget, it's a lecture. Isn't that being a little too uncharitable? And then, of course, a very sharp retort came in from the BJP, wondering if he actually understands the budget at all.
Well, I mean, let's not get down to that level. Obviously, we understand the budget. We have our own point of view, and they have theirs. And in fact, it's their point of view that has been shifting because they've been busy doing everything in this budget and the last couple of budgets that they decried and attacked when they were in the opposition. The Prime Minister called the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme a monument to governmental failure. Now they want credit for raising it to the highest level possible allocation. You've got them, I remember Sushma Swaraj's eloquent attack on liberalization of FDI in the Lok Sabha when she was leader of the opposition. Today, the government announces they want to liberalize FDI even further. So this is not a government or a party that has any business mocking Rahul Gandhi. They have actually turned around their own convictions, expressed eloquently over at least 5 or 10 years in opposition, 5 that I saw myself, and started doing everything in this government that we tried to do and initiate in UPA, which they had attempted to obstruct. So let's give them credit for following through on the very things they had opposed, but let's not compliment them for mocking our leadership for pointing out their deficiencies.
Sharp retort there, Jayant Sinha. The government's position on an MNREGA is something that you know it's going to be tough for you to defend given the extent to which you'd criticize. I know you will say you've plugged the leakages, you've made it more efficient, but how are you going to respond to the criticism that having blasted the scheme while in opposition, now your party is claiming credit for having hiked allocations to Manrega to an all-time high?
No, first we should dismiss Shashi's rhetoric and actually go to the facts. The facts are that the NDA, and I'm talking about the NDA 1 government, 98 to 2004, followed a very similar set of economic policies of liberalizing, of reforming, of opening up the economy, of fiscal consolidation and so on. So in effect, the policies, the economic thinking, the frameworks that we are using are very consistent and continuous with what NDA 1 did. And I think the criticisms of the UPA during the 10 years in which they ruled the country and of course left us with a very terrible economic mess that we've been fixing over the last 3 years simply are not defensible. So I'm not even going to go talking about what happened during their rule. What I will point out is that whether it was Manrega, whether it was the banks, whether it is the situation with respect to public investment, in each of these areas we've had to fix massive legacy problems. Let's take Narega, the point that you're bringing up, Sandeep. As far as Narega is concerned, the scheme that we inherited from the UPA was a monumental failure. What we've had to do over the last couple of years is to actually fix it in a very, very thorough manner so that it in fact does what it is supposed to do, which is to build durable assets on the ground. And that is what we're doing. With the geotagging that we're doing, we're making sure that these assets actually exist and are not just on paper, which is what was happening during the UPA time. And then in addition to that, all the Narega payments are going digitally by and large now. They're going directly into people's bank accounts. The leakage has been stopped. The corruption has been stopped. The whole program has been transformed. And because the program has been transformed, we are now in a position to really start to increase the allocation towards that, which is now going up to 48,000 crores, because this is actually going to go out and build much needed vital rural infrastructure. And in this particular case, we've been talking about building farm ponds in my own Jharkhand. They're called dobas, and they have been very important in terms of dealing with the drought. So these are the kinds of things that we are getting done through NREGA, which of course the UPA was unable to do. It was a failed program when they had it. With us, it's become a very successful way of building rural infrastructure and making sure people are gainfully employed and are getting paid for the hard work that they do. That's the difference.
I don't want this to be a debate only on the Manrega because that can be a never-ending one. But Shashi Tharoor, I'll give you an opportunity to counter Jayant Sinha. But a broader question is, what's wrong if they're carrying forward your good schemes? What's wrong if they are sort of reinventing them, re-engineering them? Look at what they've done with Aadhaar as well. So I don't see a fault with that. What's your specific letdown? Yeah, absolutely. But what is it in the budget specifically that
I don't either, Sandeep.
Sure.
I think that what is not... Let me just say, please, on what Jayant said. Number one, nothing wrong. On the contrary, it's right that they've taken the good ideas of the UPA, which do not go back to UPA to NDA 1, but are UPA ideas, and have actually continued and persisted with them and funded them better. I'm very pleased about that. I have absolutely no problem. But on the overall issue, let's face it, with the NDA, where they stand depends on where they sit. So when they were in NDA 1, they were in government, so they did conducted certain policies, which they resolutely opposed when they were in opposition. The moment they cross the floor and become the government again, they pursue these policies and defend them with the zeal of which my good friend Jayant is capable. He was lucky enough not to be part of the NDA opposition, which we saw in action during, in my case, I only came into politics in 2009, but I've seen the 5 years of the destructive opposition of the NDA, their complete unwillingness to cooperate on any constructive development project in this country, the opposition to everything from Aadhaar, which is another thing that they tout today with great pride, to the Manrega scheme. And today, of course, in government, they see virtues in everything we've done, but they are loath to give credit. So let me give them credit for recognizing a good project when they see it.
When they spot one. But in politics...
Shashi, that's actually not right. In fact, just today the Honorable Finance Minister praised the wonderful work that Nandan did in architecting Aadhaar and the UID scheme. Of course, you have to remember that the idea for a national identity project and a national smart card was in fact introduced in the NDA government. It got started then, and of course it was taken forward by Nandan to an extent. But it's really the genius of the Honorable Prime Minister in terms of harnessing Jan Dhan, getting up bank accounts to 99% penetration, Aadhaar and the mobile platform and everything we are doing for the digital side that is really making this whole system work so well.
Jayant Sinha, Shashi Tharoor, I don't want this debate to be about who should get credit for where we are as far as the reform story is concerned. It's about the budget. Shashi Tharoor, let me pin it down to your three big objections, if any, with the budget. The reason we are saying is, we heard Rahul Gandhi speak outside the parliament, and we didn't get a feeling that he had any coherent, valid economic argument against the budget. Some of your other leaders may have articulated them, including former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram. But what is the specific economic coherent argument that you have against the budget that's been presented by Finance Minister Jaitley? Let's get down to specifics. Shashi Tharoor.
A very long list, but I'll try and keep it down to three in the interest of time. Number one, as you said, since you wanted to be three, the first is that there is an astonishing gap between their projections, the figures they are floating out there in the budget, and the actual record, and therefore the likely reality. To take one example, they say the agriculture sector will grow by 4.1% under their benediction. Well, in the last 3 years, the NDA has presided over 1.3% agricultural growth. Yes, 2 of those years were drought years, but they in turn have caused a setback from which the agricultural sector is not going to find it that easy to recover. On top of that, demonetization has affected the winter crop. I've been told by a number of farmers that because they couldn't plant the seeds in time since they didn't have the cash during the planting season, that we're going to end up with a rabi crop which will be perhaps 25% lower than last year's yields. If they are right, and that's pure speculation, I agree, that's going to make matters even worse. In other words, even maintaining the 1.3% growth of the last 3 years is going to be difficult post-demonetization. Where on earth do they come up with 4.1% from? This is just one example, but I fear that a lot of the projections are unduly optimistic. So this is the first big problem. The second one is the macroeconomic question of the fiscal deficit. I have great admiration for the sustained efforts so far in attempting to keep the government's expenditure under control, even though the Expenditure Reforms Commission mentioned in Mr. Jetli's first budget has never been heard of since. And we still don't know what happened to expenditure control or what reforms are being proposed. But nonetheless, they have now slipped from the 3% target to 3.2%. And on top of that, Mr. Jetli has given himself some wriggle room by talking about a committee having suggested formulae under which an additional 0.5% slippage is possible. It may well be possible for him, but it will not be welcome news to the Moody's and Standard & Poor's of this world who rate our economy on the basis of, amongst other things, a fiscal deficit, which is their often the most important concern. That again is lacking. Third, amongst the many things that the sort of nitpicking, if you like, that we can do on aspects of detail, Rahul Gandhi picked specifically the question of jobs because in our country it's the crying need for the youth, and youth are more than 50% of our population under 25, 65% under 35, they need employment. Now this government has been talking about it, but if you look at formal employment, that is, you look at the official figures put out by the government, the highest figure we've got in the last 3 fiscal years is 135,000, 135,000, against Mr. Modi's own declared target of 10 crores during his term in office. So it's not even 1% of what the government says they will create. Now if you talk to my good friends in government like Jayant, they're going to say, no, but we're all going to be entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs will create the jobs for themselves. Well, that's got to actually be happening. We haven't seen any evidence of that happening. What we're seeing instead is unemployment and frustration. There's a lot of talk of skill development, but very sadly, the employability of our youth has not been strengthened in these 3 years or 2.5 years of NDA rule. So these are my 3 biggest concerns. There are many more concerns of detail, but I'm very happy to hear what Jayant has to say about them.
Jayant, I'm going to throw this to you, especially on the first one, which is agricultural growth. 4.1% many people believe is far too ambitious, especially after demonetization. And there is a tacit admission by the government that you need higher allocations for MNREGA because things in the rural space are not going to be rosy.
I wouldn't agree with that, of course. If you look at what has been happening in agriculture over the last few years, which is why we've had the 1.3% growth, you have to take into account, as Shashi correctly pointed out, that we've had 2 drought years. Despite having 2 drought years, we've still grown agriculture. We've had a very good monsoon this year, and the fact that Shashi has not mentioned, which is that if you look at the acreage that's been planted for the Rabi crop, that's up about 6 or 7%. So in fact, if you look at that acreage and you look at the moisture in the soil and all of the positive effects of having enough water in our reservoirs and so on, the thinking would be that the Rabi crop would be up by at least 8 or 9 or 10%. So there we have a big boost to the agricultural production right there. Then of course we'll have to see what happens in the Kharif crop. But I think given the monsoon, given the support that we're providing the agricultural sector, given all of the infrastructure facilities, the roads, the electricity, the seeds, the soil health card, everything that we're doing for agriculture, in light of a good monsoon and an increase in acreage, a 4.1% number is actually quite a reasonable number to go with. The other thing I will say, Shashi said that, he doesn't trust our numbers. The reality is the world trusts our numbers, and everybody has commended, in fact, that we've now reached the point where when we say we are going to hit a number in terms of either spending or revenues, we pretty much land it on the nose, and you can see that even in this budget, where in fact, unlike in the past where expenditure has been far below what is being budgeted, in our case expenditure has been very close to, and in fact has gone over what has been budgeted, and our fiscal deficit has remained at 3.5% in this fiscal year that's just ending. So we have a very good track record on our numbers. Everybody recognizes that we put our numbers together in a very realistic and achievable way, and we deliver on those as well. So I think our numbers are very sound, very solid. They have to be trusted as far as agriculture is concerned. Now let me turn to the question of jobs. I've already addressed it at length.
Jayant, I'm going to interrupt you. Jayant, I'm going to interrupt you because we heard your view on jobs and also on the fiscal deficit. So Shashi Tharoor, I should just let you know that we had Anand Sharma join in the first half of this program, and he raised these 2 specific points which Jayant countered. But I want to throw it to Swaminathan here. We haven't got a word from him yet. Which side of the debate are you in as far as agriculture push is concerned? Do you believe that the numbers look way too ambitious? 4.1% growth, is that realistic in the backdrop of the stress that's still there in the rural sector and agriculture specifically? Swami, what's your view?
Yes, I think it will get done. The figure seems credible to me, yes. But I would like to point about, Jayant Sinha talked about the world international agencies trust our figures. I must point out that the IMF says that our growth rate this year is going to go down by 1% and by next year by 0.5%, largely because of demonetization. So if he really believes the international figures, he needs to take those into account also.
Jayant, you want to counter Swami there?
Make that is not a correct comparison, because this is a forecast. IMF's forecast is 6.6%. The CEA's forecast is between 6.75% and 7.5%. These are forecasts. I'm talking about what numbers we have reported and what numbers we've actually delivered in terms of implementation and actuals and so on and so forth. So please distinguish between the two, actuals versus forecasts.
I should focus away from now agriculture to another contentious proposal in the budget, which a lot of people will compliment, which is the move to bring in more transparency in political funding. I know Shashi Tharoor, you have a point of view there, but I want to get Mukesh Butani, because he's got a question for you on this move announced by the finance minister on bringing more transparency. Okay, Shashi, make your point, and then I'll get this question on political funding.
No, I just want to react to what Jayant said.
Sure.
I never said that I don't trust the numbers of what's been delivered. On the contrary, as an Indian, I want the world to believe my country's numbers. I believe we're not China. We don't fudge numbers. India's statistics should be reliable, and I've never challenged those. What I'm challenging are precisely Mr. Jayant Sinha's government's projections and forecasts. It's when they give themselves targets and budgets that they completely fail to fulfill them. And that's what I'm talking about, just as the IMF is giving a forecast.
Shashi,
the budget is also forecasting 4.5%.
Right. Shashi, if you open up the budget numbers and take a look, and you see how close we are between the budgeted numbers and the actual revised estimate, which is very close to the actuals, you'll see how accurate we have become over the last 2 or 3 years between what we estimate in the budget and what we actually deliver in terms of spending and revenue collection. So our calibration and our ability to land our numbers between our estimates is outstanding.
All right. I have to get a question in on political funding, because that's something that viewers would want to know the view of Congress party as well, Mukesh Butani, you have a pointed question on political funding.
Dr. Tharoor, now that the current administration has taken a step towards cleansing the political funding, I wanted to know two things. Number one, what is the reaction of your party? And more importantly, my reading of this change is that the reforms are incomplete without an amendment to the People Representation Act, which is not a money bill. And if the current administration moves an amendment to the People Representation Act, would your party support it, because it will require a majority in the upper house as well?
Well, Mukesh, to be honest, it's too early to give you a categorical assurance on the second question, because the simple fact is our party has barely digested Mr. Jaitley's speech, and we certainly haven't discussed it, so we haven't formulated a thoughtful position on the details. Let me stress the details are important, because all we have so far is a rather vague enunciation of purpose, and the purpose we concur with. Nobody wants to see black money in politics, least of all us, because frankly the BJP raises far more election funding than we do, and we've been massively outspent in the last few elections in states as well as in the 2014 general elections. So we know that curbing money, big money in elections, and particularly large sums of unaccounted money, is in all our interests, as well as in the interests of India's society and India's economy. So the objective is fine. How we're going to go about it is the question. Now, a 2,000 rupee cap on cash may or may not work, because we've seen that the early 20,000 rupee cap was violated with impunity by a large number of parties without their having to pay any price for it, without any serious investigation, without any punitive action. Now, that being the case, will the same story be told about the 2,000 rupee cap? That's a legitimate question to ask. We don't know. Secondly, the problem is not so much that something is legal or illegal. Frankly, the kind of contributions that were being made in elections were always illegal. the election expenses that were officially declared and the election expenses that were actually spent appeared to involve a huge gap. You remember the late Mr. Gopinath Munde's famous statement that in the 2009 elections, when the expense limit for an MP was 25 lakhs, that he spent 8 crores. Now, he then had to retract eventually because somebody took him to court on it. But if that is the reality of election funding, it wasn't that the 8 crores was legal then and now the government has made it illegal. It was illegal then too. So what's happening? How do you ensure that people don't do the illegal thing? How do you prevent money from being given? As long as the money exists, it will find a home. The question is, it exists because it is generated. What has the government done to prevent black money generation? Are there measures in place to stop the under-invoicing, over-invoicing, fake purchase orders, artificial bills and so on, through which vast sums of unaccounted money float about in our economy and have done so for time immemorial? Let's not forget in 1978 there was the last demonetization exercise and the then Janata Party government thought they had killed black money in the country. And we now know the kinds of sums of black money that have been floating around this country within 3 decades of that demonetization. So I just wonder, are we looking at an endemic problem or have we really found the formula to break the back of it? I would love to see a true consensus amongst political parties on how to do this, create more legitimate and realistic expense limits, curb other expense limits by legal or illegal means, and do something to thwart the generation of black money, which itself, once it has been generated, will find its natural home in various ways.
Hold your thoughts there. I want to get in Jayant Sinha, and the good thing about this debate is that both Shashi Tharoor and Jayant Sinha are elected representatives, and so you have every authority and every moral right to talk about election expenditure. It's good to have both of you on the show to talk about that. But Jayant Sinha, the point that Shashi Tharoor made earlier, that BJP raises more money and hopefully Congress has been outspent by your party, and the larger point that he's made, all jokes set aside, about breaking the back of over-voicing, under-voicing, curbing down on black money electioneering. These things haven't been talked about, and experts believe the rules that have been put in place or the ones that have been suggested to be put in place can be easily circumvented.
You may find this very surprising, but I agree completely with my good friend Shashi on his second point, which is that we really need a reasoned, thorough and comprehensive debate in Parliament on election financing. And the wonderful thing, the very historic thing that's been done in this budget is that we have brought these issues to the table, and of course I fervently hope that the Congress party will work with us to be able to have a very constructive and thorough debate on all of these issues so that we can start to address the cancer of black money coming into politics. We really absolutely have to do that. That is truly important for our democracy. It's important for our future. As far as the first point is concerned about who spent more money, frankly, I don't know. I don't know how much the Congress had. I don't know in aggregate exactly what was spent by whom, where, in which election. So I really can't hazard a guess on that particular point. But what I will say is that if you really look at the generation of black money, if you really look at the steps that we have taken to curb the black economy, the parallel economy in India, they are truly transformational and historic steps. And demonetization, which was beyond a big bang, I mean it was an ultra mega big bang, and nobody could have conceived that a government would take 86% of the cash in circulation and not make it legal tender, that we would take such a historic, such a brave, such an audacious step. That was done precisely so that we would start to compress the black economy, end the kind of behavior which the Honorable FM has talked about as the old normal, and move to a new normal, a new economy that is clean, that is white, and that's why we are doing what we're doing here in this budget as well. Now, of course, we've all got to sit together, all those of us that are custodians of our democracy, that are custodians of our government, and we have to discuss amongst ourselves and get all the best expertise from our people, from experts around the world to see what we can do to put in place an electoral financing system that actually is clean, that is transparent, and that is honest.
I'll give both of you the leeway to say if you do not know how much is spent and how it happens. Perhaps Motilal Vora from the Congress and Piyush Goyal will have a more informed discussion on that, both being treasurers of their respective parties. But Swami, let me throw this to you. Finally, there's consensus on the show, and both sides seem to agree that one needs to have a political cleansing of sorts as far as election spending is concerned. But are we groping in the dark on this one just yet?
Shashi quoted a BJP MP. Let me quote a Congress MP, Naveen Jindal. When I had suggested, what about public funding of elections to get rid of black money and corruption, he said, Swami, of all the money that is extracted by the political class from the business class, only 1% is spent in elections, 99% is pocketed. In other words, if you're talking about the scourge of black money and the underlying problem, it has very little to do with elections and election funding. It has something to do with the fact that politics has become a business. You enter politics to get rich through illegal means. I mean, it is as deep and fundamental as that. Now, how you get over that through a consensus, I don't know. You require a gradual cleansing process. But I remember when Arun Jaitley once asked me, he said, Swami, what do you mean by Big Bang reforms? I said, Big Bang would mean within 2 years, you put 200 politicians and businessmen in jail. I mean, we need to work towards a police judicial system which can do that. I'm not sure that you can work out a consensus on that. Perhaps this will evolve gradually. But the problem goes much deeper and far beyond election funding. That's the limited point I want to make.
That's a fair point. We're completely running out of time. So I've got a trick question to close this debate with for both Jayant Sinha. To both, Shashi, you want to counter Swami? And then I've got a trick question for both you and Jayant Sinha to close things out.
Just to say that I think both Jayant and I gave up far more lucrative professions and far higher incomes to come into politics in a spirit of public service. So I think we may be the wrong interlocutors to address this particular charge against.
Swami will agree with that as well, and so do we. Okay, to close things out, a quick trick question to both you and Jayant Sinha. First to you, we've heard you criticize the budget and we've seen Jayant Sinha defend the budget. Let's hear you praise the budget. What is the one thing that you really liked about the budget? And I think that's a cue for Supriya's next question to Jayant Sinha as well. But Shashi Tharoor, what's the one thing that you liked about the budget? Let's leave party affiliations aside. As someone who understands business and economy, what's the one thing that you really liked about this budget?
Now look, the curse in my case is that's the only thing that will be quoted about anything I said this evening. So I will have hell to pay in the political establishment if I answer that question. But let me just say, I would accept the intent of the budget right throughout. The budget is full of good intentions. The political funding example is a very good one, that the government really does seek in its vision and the way it speaks things out, it does seek to do the right things by the country. Whether it has done so, whether there is any credibility to its expectations and projections by comparison with the reality on the ground, and whether most of the tangible accomplishments of this government are not really anchored in the work of the previous government that they've derided while they're in opposition, those are different questions. And I think my answers are pretty evident from all of that.
Shashi Tharoor, I get your point. Given your political affiliations, it will be difficult for you to praise the budget. Do you have similar compulsions as well, Jayant Sinha? Or is there something in the budget that the technocrat Jayant Sinha we know about did not like? Let's be candid. Let's not be partisan. Let's not play ministers of state in this government. But let's talk like technocrats. What is it, that one thing that you did not like about Union Budget 2017?
We could have certainly done more as far as stressed assets are concerned. That's obviously an area that I've done a lot of work in. And I feel that we need to be addressing that problem as efficiently and effectively as we can. The very good news on that is that the Honorable Finance Minister in some of his interviews post the budget has indicated that there are a number of alternatives that are under consideration right now, and that is a very high priority issue for the Finance Ministry. So that's an area where we do need to address some underlying issues.
Appreciate both of you being honest and candid there, but I'm sure you'd still want to hear Swaminathan Iyer's final verdict on the budget. Swami, you've heard Jayant Sinha very eloquently defend the budget, and you've heard Shashi Tharoor raise some very pertinent points as well. What's your overall rating? 5.5 at 1 in the afternoon. What's the rating right now?
I'll still keep it at 5.5, I think, for the reasons that I listed at the very beginning, because I was thinking not just of this budget. I was talking in the context of this is the fourth budget and the structural change needed to come by this time, and it didn't come, and that is the main reason for my only giving 5.5.
I'm sure all our panelists will at least agree on one thing, that Swami is hard to please.
And his view doesn't change.
And he's consistent with his views. Absolutely, Supriya.
So on that note, thank you very much, each one of you, for joining us. Jayant Sinha, Shashi Tharoor, Jay Panda, Mukesh Butani, and of course Swaminathan Iyer on The Verdict, right here on ET Now. News, views and analysis continue on the channel. Stay right here with us.